Hello all, and this video I wanted to brush up my own thoughts and concerns, if you will, with Spenglers, Man and Technics. Obviously being a Spengler stan on this channel, and already doing a standalone video on Prussianism and socialism on this channel, I figured I would do one on one of my other favorite works, really. And I think there's a reason that I'll get to by the end of this video why that is. But I also wanted to maybe brush up perhaps on what does it mean to take in hypermodernity on top of Man and Technics that John David Ebert and Michael Kamins offers, and Francis Culkin, I think is that his name? I don't remember. But because I think in this kind of post-pandemic world that we're slowly creeping ourselves out of, I suppose, hypermodernity now is front and center, and how do we live this kind of hypermodern life is, I think, one of the fundamental questions I've been asking on this channel since I started it. And so just as Spengler points out in Man and Technics, getting right into it, it's about the way in which we live our lives in relationship to these tools we've created. And obviously, in 2021, the internet is the grandest tool of them all. This is kind of point out, it has these Faustian philosopher stone-like properties, if you will. But I think there's also a sort of political implication that's going on in the background with it that I've been talking about when I mention province people, which is, there's a video on this channel about that as well, where I kind of take the Heideggerian idea of de-worlding as brought to us by these techniques of communication through the internet now, and social media in particular. I think this de-worlding is accelerating and bringing out the collapse of the world city faster than anticipated, actually, and it's actually perhaps even outflanking these kind of eternalized proletariats that I think use the internet to their advantage. They use the machines against the establishment, whether you're for them or not. The internet is ultimately the kind of edifice that brings it all together, in my opinion. And so I think, I don't want to radically claim perhaps that the internet has these spiritual properties to them, but I think it's, I think there's a reason why even Spengler in this text, he ends it with one of the most inspiring quotes he would put on some Inspire post on Twitter about overcoming or something, the lost position. It is a beautiful excerpt, don't get me wrong, but I think there's a reason why he puts that at the end, is we ultimately really don't have autonomy over these techniques. They're quite tragic, and I think the internet is definitely a continuation of that tragedy. And but I don't think it necessarily has to all just be this great collapse. I think in some regards there's kind of these advantages with this world city seems to be depleting itself as I'm making this video. We continue to see the community, as pointed out with this kind of hypermodern experience, is totally collapsing. Race relations have totally fallen apart in America now. You're seeing it in places you wouldn't have even imagined seeing this kind of activity happening even 10 or 15 years ago. And so I think one of the fundamental tasks we have at hand is, trying to make a duality of these kind of communities, or the emergence of them sort of together. I think to some extent, even whether it's a mistake or not, with these algorithms and these kind of separations of people, this almost like cafeteria-like way big tech has orientated us now in these kind of emerging ideological echo chambers. It's kind of like we're becoming these different cults, and I think, as I got over on a matter of life and death on the internet, people are starting to form families out of these internet dating websites. Half of them now are from the internet. So there's this duality of kind of our avatar, this physical form, and this internet experience. I think the hypermodern is on the cusp of, there is this tragic component to it, though, obviously. You could argue we're definitely losing our humanity along the way. And our, these properties that once defined us, these identities that we've held on for ages, are, eroding more and more, whether you want to argue it's incompetence by our elite class or not. I've gone over kind of my own stance on race relations, and how it's slowly but surely, at least in America, becoming less and less sufficient to be like the identity around it that gives you meaning and a placement in this world, something to identify with, something to strive with, and collectivize with, isn't sufficient anymore, as we've kind of just continued to really become this kind of global people. And I think if you want to, kind of go back and look at some of these different aspects of the internet, kind of having these sort of spiritual kind of metaphors to them, that I've noticed is, there's this kind of internet justice that's emerging, where we're seeing, the internet always wins, this kind of revenge done by this collective internet, that bad karma is going to kind of catch up to you eventually, and you're going to get exposed for your wrongdoings by this internet. And I think also with that, as Michael Kamins points out, these kind of different metaphors, if you will, and I think that it's not just metaphors anymore, but you're starting to kind of see almost multiplicities of once living things actually emerge, that could only exist online. These kind of shitpost accounts on Twitter that take these historical figures. You almost can recognize some of these really good and talented thinkers on Twitter with the thinker themselves. And unless you're in this kind of internet linguistic atmosphere, you wouldn't be able to get that. And obviously, if you put it in terms like that, this is where you get to the kind of ambitious ideas that I've been talking about, where I think the internet is offering us this opportunity to create new identities we can actually authentically identify with, in 2021, as opposed to the stagnation that we continue to all ultimately acknowledge. Nobody defends the kind of culture we live in. Everyone admits that it's an absolute mess. And are we just gonna let the abyss take us, or are we gonna try to do something about that? And I think perhaps this decentralization, this de-worlding process, how can we still try to, if you will, almost make the most of this duality that we have left, of trying to redeem this, old world that we used to live in. Spengler put the kind of lost position, if you will. How can we kind of push that into the internet, kind of make values, if you will, almost from it? And I think to some extent you do kind of see this emergence of this kind of internet decorum. Think of it's a metaphor in of itself. A catfish. You don't think of, an actual catfish so much these days. You think of a deceitful person online, usually in this kind of romantic way. They misrepresent themselves, and it's considered, disgusting. But I think catfishing goes. You can put it towards grifting. You can put it towards a lot of these different things, and I think that kind of goes in with this kind of internet morality that we might be stumbling ourselves on. And then, as I've kind of talked about, perhaps this perception of our death on social media, as we've slowly, kind of pushed our identity and our internet experience together in this kind of dualistic way, as I've tried to lay out in this video. Not saying that that's a good thing. I like anonymity a lot, actually, but let's be honest, they're definitely trying to push for identification. And so, what do we contend with this kind of experience where you still have loved ones, like social media presence, in a sense? It's kind of calcified. You can look back on it, you look at these conversations, you can really see their personality in this historical way that's never been done before. And that's one of the great culture drivers of them all, is death. And we kind of live in this state of death denial, but I think as people become more and more aware as we age, and these social media sites in a weird sense become these virtual graveyards, it'll be interesting to see what maybe can come out of that. And this is kind of a little bit of a futuristic approach to how I see perhaps this kind of hypermodern period playing out. And I think the pandemic really showcased to us the direness of the inframing, if you will, as Heidegger would put it, of the old world closing, as schooling was done in this distance fashion, this individual fashion, where you individually all plugged in to this Zoom call, if you will, or even if that, so many people just didn't even show up. And there's a lot of consequences that we've already discussed on this channel, actually, about schooling, and then still the need to kind of maintain this avatar of community in person. It's insane to even consider that this is even possible for even a millennial like myself, a late millennial who grew alongside this internet connection and watched it continue to grow and grow. And part of the thing about the internet, though, is you're creating it along the way. And so in some sense we are kind of playing this role of this kind of divine, this sort of divine activity, if you will, of trying to create our own reality, quite literally. And I think you see that all the time, where these ideologies continue to almost live in these parallels to each other, to the point where they're intersecting less and less in this digital frame. But in the actual community, it's just absolute anarchy and chaos. So yeah, I think taking in this kind of self-awareness and realizing how important even our internet experiences could be if we try to maintain our well-being in this kind of avatar that we possess, or trying to kind of practice this mindfulness, if you will, of that, I think is one of the more sufficient ways to maybe take in the kind of hyper-modern experience and perhaps redeem ourselves in some way. And one of the things, as I want to close here, just as Spengler puts that kind of inspiring quote about the Roman soldier who stood by the post even as he was consumed by was it a volcano? But ultimately we don't really have a choice for these where these techniques are really taking us. It's just what we're gonna make of them. And if we continue down this road, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're kind of giving up and doing this black-pilled thing, but perhaps new doors are going to open for other generations to come that will be able to see things in a different way than we were. And like I said, I think that's part of the whole hypermodern experience, is this kind of last bit of duality that we have of this physical form and this internet experience that I think is they're still interwoven in a way that one needs the other still, but that might not necessarily be true forever. And as we're kind of starting to see with this experimentation with the human avatar, the human body, some of these dystopian articles that kind of give you a cold sweat, a distrust of these kind of things, this sort of loss of who we actually are as humans. That's a startling process, and we're going to have to contend with that. And it doesn't seem like running off and living in huts and being disconnected might be the best answer, but perhaps running off and being in huts and still communionize in this digital way and still try to maintain both is something, at least, perhaps politically, as I've pointed out in Province People and these other videos that I've been doing. But yeah, I just wanted to share some thoughts on what it means to be perhaps part of this Province People that I've been talking about, and how to maybe take in your life living in this kind of hyper modern experience, and what to make of it, really. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys.